Hi, I'm Allison. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album tier list, but since it's kind of an older trend, I thought it would be fun to do a little spin on it and actually make a physical tier list to represent my opinions on all of the studio albums. I actually drew out little cards with the albums on them and album covers on them, and I'm going to be placing them directly on this poster board that I've made up. I don't like long intros, but before we start, I just want to make it really clear that these are my subjective, albeit correct, opinions about this band. My sense of humor, I might really dig into some of these albums or over-exaggerate my critiques of them, because I think that's funny, but I have a lot of love for this band. Hopefully that's obvious. And I really think all of these albums have something or other to offer, so don't kill me, thank you. So the first studio album that I'll be ranking is Willoughby's Beach, which is not a studio album, it's an EP. And the only reason I'm including it is because I like it, and this is my video. It does not have the musical complexity or production quality to even be compared to a lot of King Gizzard's later work, but there's something about the high energy, engaging music from start to finish in this EP that I just personally really enjoy. I don't think I can put it any higher than like a low C tier or a high D tier. I'm gonna put it in D for now, but I mean, like, I just really like it. Up, we're talking about 12 Bar Bruise, which is the debut studio album. In my opinion, it's kind of a lot like Willoughby's Beach, but longer and worse. I think there are some high points. There are some songs that put me to sleep on this album, and it's really not one that I enjoy listening to or revisit very often. So this could be our first F tier, unfortunately. One of the more controversial albums, Eyes Like the Sky. It was intentionally written to be very different from the rest of the band's sound, so that kind of explains why some people really don't like it. For me, it's kind of a mixed bag. Not to completely dox myself, but the part of the world I'm from is super into the cowboy western thing, so I'm a little sick of it. But I don't know, the storytelling is pretty good. The music is really good. I think underrated, underappreciated. My one biggest critique is just how short it is, and how I think the story was wrapped up really sloppily. The protagonist, Miguel, is such an interesting character, and it would have been really cool to see more of his reactions to everything going on around him, and for there to be more time spent lingering on the story itself. I think it's probably a D tier, although I think I like it more than Willoughby's Beach. Okay, this is where people are gonna get kind of unhappy with me. This is Float Along, Fill Your Lungs, which is the band's first deep dive into the psychedelic sound. I really love psychedelic music. I'm a huge fan of like 70s, 80s Turkish psychedelia. I really like that kind of sound. However, the production on this album is really grating for me personally. I think there's a lot of sounds and effects that actually just hurt my ears to listen to. Even though I like the sound they were going for and I like a lot of the songs, it's just not one I revisit very often. I think it's probably gonna go to the bottom of the D tier. I really wish I liked this album more because I think on paper it's so suited to my taste. But yeah, it's just, as an album, doesn't super work for me. Oddments is a really tough album to rank because the highs are so high and the lows are literally the worst on the entire discography. I revisit so many of these songs so often. It's a really fun album. I personally do like the grab bag sort of albums where they take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, experiment with new sounds. And I think it's really cool. But God, some of the songs just suck. So I think it's still a D tier, but it might be the highest D tier. I am so excited to talk about I'm in Your Mind, Fuzz, because it's one that just immediately goes to B tier for me. This album is really great. I think it's really beloved by the fans for good reason. It's kind of the start of them making albums a little bit more cohesive, so you can just sit and really get into the listen all the way through, which is a big deal for me. I really like that. When I first got into the band, it was on the recommendation of a friend, and they had me listen to a couple albums, and I just really wasn't into it until I heard this one, and it was just so good. It was good enough to get me into the rest of the band. It's not perfect, and I think they make a lot of stuff that's way, way better later, but this is the first great King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album, in my opinion. I love it, and I think this is a great place to start a new fan at. For me, Quarters is a pretty easy one to rank. I think it has a great sound. I think it's really fun to listen to. I like the concept of having 4 approximately 10-minute songs. You can really sit with them and take them in. This is one that parents and grandparents won't yell at you for putting on either. I think it's a good time. It is kind of unfortunate that one of the 4 songs on this album isn't good, in my opinion. I don't like Infinite Rise. I always skip it, which is so unfortunate because The River and God is in the Rhythm particularly are such good songs. But I feel like this is a pretty obvious C tier. I don't know. There's not much to complain about. It's good. I like it. Actually, there is a lot to complain about. I literally just complained about one of the songs. Paper Mâché Dream Balloon is another album that is a little bit more palatable for a mainstream or general listener taste. It's a lot softer, it's digestible. I wish it would have pushed the envelope a little bit more than it did. I think there could have been a little bit more room for experimentation, but this album is an A tier for me. Fun fact about that album, I get really nervous at the dentist specifically, and I like to listen to music. And this is one of the albums that I put on all the time at the dentist because it's just so soothing. I think that might be a testament to it. I don't have anything to say about Nonagon Infinity that hasn't already been said. Obviously it's S tier, it's a great album. Good job, Nonagon Infinity. Oh my god, I'm probably gonna edit out most of the time. Oh my god! I'm probably gonna edit out most of the times that happens, but that has been happening this entire time. Flying Microtonal Banana is a fan favorite for a reason. It's their first foray into a microtonal sound. It's just so good. I don't know, I think the arrangement of the songs on this album is really fun. I think all the songs are really engaging. Opens with a ton of energy with Rattlesnake, and then as you get more to the B-side of the album, there's a little bit more like experimental or creative new ideas thrown in there to keep the sound from getting old. For me, this is an S tier, and actually, like, I'm kind of debating this. Is it better than Nonagon Infinity? I think it might be. I'm so sorry. That's like sacrilegious, but I think it is. If they think it's our best, I think it's our best that we've talked about yet. It's just so good. My least favorite King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album is Murder of the Universe. And I actually wrote out a script for this part of the video because I really wanted to speak very clearly and give some supported reasons why I don't like this album. So here we go. First of all, I am not opposed to spoken word passages. I like Eyes Like the Sky, okay? I think it's a neat idea, and I think that the narration actually works really well. And my favorite album has some spoken word passages too, and I think they sound really neat, so that's not necessarily my problem. My problem is like the balance, I think, is totally off. There's some parts where it feels like the narration and the music are actually competing for attention, which is super distracting. When you're trying to enjoy the music, you can't. You're trying to enjoy the story, you can't. So there's nothing there to enjoy. I also don't like the story. I think on paper the story is silly and goofy, like eldritch, epic, and that is super cool on paper, but in execution it's so ungrounded, it doesn't make any sense. I know it ties into the Gizverse and like more of the lore of recurring stories and characters throughout all of the discography. I think that's neat. I've never been a big lore person, like, because I just don't get into stuff like that, so honestly, if that's you, I have a lot more respect for you, and I think you have a lot of good reasons to like this album because you get the story. I don't get the story. I think it's dumb. I don't get it. I don't understand it, therefore it is dumb. Solid logic. But I just think like there's no internal logic. Like this happens, and this other thing randomly happens, and then that happens, and there's no, like, connection there. Again, it is my subjective opinion that this story is objectively ridiculous and bad. So you can't disagree with me, because it's my opinion. You're not allowed to. The other issue I have with this album, and this one is a lot more petty, I don't like vomit. It's like a borderline phobia for me. I don't like thinking about it. I don't like hearing a character who I think already has an annoying, grating voice talk about it for like 10 minutes and that be the climax to the entire album. Very, very off-putting for me. I know people are probably already commenting, you should just give the album another listen. And I hear you. But I've listened to this album many, many times, and every time I listen to it, I hate it even more. So I'm really glad this album exists. I'm glad that people like it. It is my least favorite. I got so into complaining about this album that I completely forgot I was going to talk about the things I actually like about it. So here they are now. First of all, the song Digital Black goes so insanely hard. I hope I really impress that because it's an amazing song. I listen to it all the time. No complaints, honestly, about that song. I think Stu's vocals are pretty good throughout the whole album. They fit the sound really well. I think they're mixed really well. The percussion is also really good during this album. The other thing is I actually like the Altered Beast segment of the story quite a bit. I just think the other parts aren't quite as good. This is not going to be a popular. Yeah. This will be a nice break from that little tirade I just did. This is Sketches of Brunswick East, which is a collab project with the group Mild High Club. I don't know a lot about them, but I've heard a couple of their songs, particularly. I think probably their most popular is Homage, and that's in a lot of my playlists. So I think it's a great collab. This album, well, the concept is to kind of establish a sense of place, so it's kind of environmental or ambient, and I'm a big Radiohead fan, so it's really no surprises that I enjoy this. Another interesting thing to note is that one of the tracks, Tezeta, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but that is an allusion to a concept in Ethiopian jazz. It's kind of like a musical mode and also a culturally descriptive term for a sense of nostalgia, sort of like recurring or circular musical structure. And Ethio jazz is actually coincidentally a genre that I listen to a lot, actually. I'm really into it. I would love to learn more about it, but I just think it's kind of cool that they nodded to that, and this jazzy sound kind of does evoke some of those same ideas. I kind of stand by what I said with Paper Mâché Dream Balloon, where it's like I wish they would have maybe had a little bit more of a creative edge in this album, but I feel pretty comfortable putting it in B tier for now. Polygondwanaland is an album that I could talk about for an hour, but I'm gonna try to keep it a little bit shorter than that. I am a huge fan of Irregular Meter, and this entire album is full of like uneven time signatures and polymeters, polyrhythms, so much cool stuff going on. It's definitely more of like a progressive sort of sound. The story is still, there's some like a little bit of silliness to it, but it's like a little bit more grounded. It has a clear internal logic, sequence of events happening. It has some interesting things to say about society and power and cycles of violence. I study politics, and I really love this story. The layers of complexity that this thing has is just insane. There is so much going on. I've listened to it, God, like hundreds of times, and every time I listen, I notice something new, and none of it is in conflict with each other. Nothing is distracting or grating. It all just fits. It's like a really complex puzzle all fitting together so well. It's so good. I love it so much. It is definitely my favorite King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album. We're kind of nearing the halfway point, or we're at it. So I thought I'd just go a little up close so you can see where the ranking is right now. Just because I think it was like a little bit difficult to see in the background there. All right, let's get into the rest. Gumboot Soup is kind of a hard one for me to rank. There's a lot of songs that I think are really phenomenal. There's a couple songs that are a little bit more forgettable, in my opinion. And it is intentionally sort of an odds and ends album, like Oddments was, because it's the last of 5 albums they produced in a single year. So they just had so many ideas rattling around. But because of that, you know, it just isn't as cohesive as a whole album. I think maybe a B tier. I'd probably rather listen to Sketches of Brunswick East, but I think I like it more than Quarters. So I like where it's sitting at the end of the B tier, maybe. Beginner's Luck and Great Chain of Being, though, S tier songs. So good. So good. I think a lot of people don't listen to this one because it's like, people criticize it a lot, I think. Same with Oddments. In fact, when I had Amazon Music, it wasn't even on Amazon Music for some reason, so I couldn't even listen to it on my preferred platform. I have Spotify now, don't worry. So it's just kind of one I overlooked for a long time, and I kind of assume other people do too. There are really good tracks on there, so if you haven't heard it for whatever reason, please check it out. It's very good. Just not, doesn't fit together super well as an album. I prefer to just listen to the tracks on their own than actually listen to the whole thing. Fishing for Fishies. It's hard because I think the A side of this album is like a B or C, and the B side is an S. The second half of this album, on its own, would probably be at the very top of my tier list. Those songs are unfathomably amazing. If I'm trying to get somebody into the band, or at the very least recommending this album, but maybe there's someone who's a little bit more impatient or not used to listening to an album in full, I'll just say, like, listen to Real's Not Real, This Thing, and Ocarine. Trust me, those 3 songs are just so freaking good. I love them so much. First half of the album, I do not like the song Cruel Millennial. Not at all, really. I think the Bird song and the titular track are decent, but they're a little, they have like a sort of kiddie music sound to them, which, you know, is what it is. I think songs can do that and sound really good. I think songs can do that and sound really kind of dumb. And I think that this album is somewhere in the middle. And even though I think the first half of the album drags it down a little bit, it's still just so enjoyable to listen to. Big fan. Big fan. I'm putting in an A. I think A tier is like the best place. Actually, I think it should go to the top. No. I think probably it's better than Paper Mâché Dream Balloon. But I don't think it'll stay at the top of A. I'm sure something else will knock it out of there. Promise I didn't plan this, but I think this is the album that knocks Fishing for Fishies out of the top of A tier. Infest the Rat's Nest. Huge change up in sound. This is their first full-on metal album. They did a little bit with Great Chain of Being to kind of tease that they were looking into that sound. They did a phenomenal job. I've heard this said a lot by different fans and critics of the band, that this is like a proper thrash metal album. It doesn't sound like a band just decided to experiment with a metal sound. It sounds like they really knew what they were doing, and it's just a really good album. It's a good King Giz album. It's a good metal album. And that's a really cool accomplishment. I think the environmental themes in this one are really well thought out. I think the story, it's not perfect, but it's really interesting and thought-provoking. KG is the group's second microtonal album, and this one is a favorite for me. I think that there is so much originality and creativity in this album. Every single track stands out in its own way, and they're also super cohesive together and arranged really well. So this is an album where I'll go in and I will listen to any song on this album on its own just because I love it so much, and I listen to the album in full all the time as well, and I think that is a really good place for an album to be. It definitely belongs in S tier, but it's a little tricky to figure out where it should go. I think I still prefer Polygondwanaland because I just think there's more going on conceptually there. And I know a lot of people will compare Flying Microtonal Banana with KG because they're both going for the microtonal sound. I've even heard people say like, oh, there are not enough new ideas in KG. But I completely disagree. I think they actually have very, very different sounds. And the songs in Flying Microtonal Banana maybe aren't as cohesive together as KG. I think I prefer to listen to this album. And honestly, that's like the highest praise I could give KG as an album, that it's a continuation of the ideas in Flying Microtonal Banana, and there are a lot of similarities. And even as amazing as an album as Flying Microtonal Banana is, that I think KG is even a little bit better. I think that's really, really huge praise because it shows that they didn't get tired and repetitive, that they found new ways to experiment with microtonal sound. And I feel pretty comfortable with that, although I could see those flip-flopping, honestly. They're both really good. LW is sort of a sister album to KGLW. And it's another one that's hard to talk about outside of the context of Flying Microtonal Banana, KG, and LW, because they're like a three-part microtonal exploration. I see a lot of people say this one is better than KG, and honestly, to me, I think that just comes down to subjective taste, because I really see where they're coming from. I think there's a bit more experimental edge to this one, a little bit more variety in the sound. I think all the tracks, just like KG, they stand on their own two legs really well. But I guess, for me, just subjectively, I enjoy the individual tracks of KG better than LW, even though I think it's just as good of an album. But it's probably going to be an A tier for me. Maybe below Fishing for Fishies, though. I think that seems right. Butterfly 3000 is a really interesting one to look back on in retrospect because a little bit more recently the band has been leaning into a sort of like electronic sound, which this album 100% pioneered. It's very synth pop, dream pop sort of thing going on, and I really like that sound. I think it's a weird album, but it's fun. And I know that this shouldn't be influencing my opinions, but I also like the music videos that came with the songs in here. I thought they were really creative. But I'm gonna try to not let that boost my opinion of the album too much because I didn't really take any of that into account for the other albums. But yeah, this is kind of one that I think would fall to most people's sort of mid-range. I think I probably have to agree. Maybe it's a B tier. I definitely would put it below Mind Fuzz, for sure. God, this is tough. I think maybe there's just a little bit more creativity in this one than in Sketches, so I think it's gonna go above Sketches. Yeah. I'm going to rank Made in Timeland very quickly because, to be honest, it's the album I've listened the least to. I've probably only listened to it 2 or 3 times all the way through. And that's because it was actually designed to just be background music at the shows and released as kind of a fun little Easter egg for fans. Yeah, I only ever listen to it as background music. This is something I listen to while I'm drawing or reading or not really paying attention to it. I think it's probably an F tier. Yeah. But like, no real complaints about it. I don't, it's fine. It's just background music. Omnium Gatherum is the epitome of conflicting for me. On the one hand, this song has some really, really, really stellar tracks. Right, so this thing is almost an hour and a half long. It's an album, not a song. Some songs that I repeatedly go back to over and over again. On the other hand, it has some tracks that I don't like, that no matter how many times I listen to, I get bored with, can't even really remember them or stand out to me that much. But then on the other hand, it's a really cool summary of everything that the band has done up to this point. I think it's hard not to compare it to Gumboot Soup and Oddments because they're all kind of going for the same idea. And this one might be the best at what they're all going for, at really representing everything that the band is capable of. So I think it's a really good one to listen to if that's what you're into. Like, how far can we stretch this sound? Because that's really cool. God, it is long. And part of that is because the opening track is the longest song in the discography. But then on the other hand, I think that the Dripping Tap deserves every minute of its length. It's a very long song, but it is super, super engaging and interesting from start to finish. It is a great one to jam out to. I listen to it all the time. So I wouldn't advocate for that song being cut any shorter. So I don't really know if there's a solution to this issue. It's just like, it's an album that you kind of have to commit to. You're like, okay, I'm gonna just sit down and dedicate a significant amount of time to listening to this. Maybe it's also a C tier. Maybe I might put it above Quarters, I think. It's definitely one that I would want to make sure someone doesn't skip it if they're interested in doing a deep dive into the band, because a lot of gems in that album. And also, as I said, it's a really cool way to listen to the breadth of the sound. But is it one that I'm gonna like regularly listen to? Definitely not. It's kind of a lot. It's kind of a lot. Ice, Death, Planets, Lungs, Mushrooms, and Lava is a neat album. It has a cool concept in that each song is a different musical mode. I think it has an interesting, maybe leaning into a little bit of a jazzy sound, definitely like a jam sort of vibe. For me though, it's probably gonna be a C tier, and honestly, I don't know why. Like, I really like the songs Ice 5 and Iron Lung. Those are probably my favorites on the album personally. The rest of the songs just never really clicked with me. I don't have any concrete criticisms of this album. I know it's pretty well liked. I think it's really good, but it just hasn't clicked in my head yet. It would probably be a low C tier for me. On the other hand, Laminated Denim is an album that clicked almost immediately with me. First listen, I was just super into it, especially Hypertension. I think it's just a really like 10 out of 10 song. I like how it's just 2 songs and you get a lot of time with them to really let them sink in, to notice everything interesting going on. I like how they experiment with rhythm and meter. I think probably a B tier. I might put it above Butterfly 3000. Changes is one that I have a lot of glowing praise for. The first thing is that the use of modulation really creates a super unique sound in this album. I can't really think of any other sound or album or band that really captures the same sound as Changes. It's one of the more unique things I've listened to. Big fan of the album, and also the whole album ties really cohesively and well together, especially how they have sort of like a medley or introductory sort of thing at the very beginning, and then a shorter version of that at the end to really like just tie everything together. It introduces ideas and then brings them back up and fleshes them out and then ties it all in a nice little bow at the end. I really enjoy that. This is one I love listening to. It's definitely an A tier for me. One interesting side note is that I think Gandhi is like a pretty well-liked song by the fans of King Gizzard. And even though I like it, it's definitely not my favorite on this album. I think it's great, but I don't understand why like that is the standout song for most people, because it's obviously AstroTurf, right? Like that is obviously the best song on this album. It's so good. I think it might end up moving above LW. I listen to it more than LW. Yeah. PetroDragonic Apocalypse, or Dawn of Eternal Night, an annihilation of planet Earth and the beginning of merciless damnation. This is another one that maybe just hasn't clicked yet. I think there's a lot here that I, on paper, should really like. Gila Monster, S tier song. I listen to it in the gym all the time. And I like how it continues the metal sound, but with like a little bit more like progressive metal, in that there's a lot of playing around with time signatures. There's a lot, like, longer, more well-developed songs, maybe? I don't know what it is, it just doesn't click on a completely subjective level for me. I've listened to it quite a few times, and I feel like it's possible I listened to it like 2 or 3 more times and then, like, yeah, I'm really into it and it really climbs the ranks for me. But at the moment, there's only one song on it that I really get into. And even though I think there's a lot going on here, it's just not my favorite personally. I really prefer Infest the Rat's Nest. I would listen to that one any day. But it's hard not to compare the only 2 metal albums in the discography to each other, and I think one is just so much clearly superior in my taste. God, like, maybe it's a C or a D tier. I think it's probably a D tier for now, but as I've said, this is one I need to listen to more, and I think it could climb the ranks. But maybe it's like the top of D tier. I'd rather listen to this than Oddments. Come on. Yeah. Oh. It feels wrong for it to be so low because it's objectively good. The Silver Cord maybe is one that hasn't been received as well. I definitely don't think it's one that fans hate or anything like that. But I feel like for the majority of people, it's definitely on the lower end of their preference. There are people who love this, and these are EDM kids. We all know the type. Hi, Alex. I like putting this one on in the background. I will say I think it's more good of background music for me personally. I like synthesized weird computery sounds as much as the next person. The extended mix though, too much. Way too much, way too long. And I actually think Fantano said this in his review, where it's like the normal album is way too short and the extended mix is way too long, and I completely agree with that. I think that's a really good critique of this album. So here's the problem I'm having. Eyes Like the Sky, being objective here, is a better album than The Silver Cord. I think that there is more musical intrigue, more story-based intrigue, more originality. It makes more sense. I don't know. I think it's just like, if I was trying to be objective, I was trying to be an art critic, I would say that is better than The Silver Cord. Willoughby's Beach is worse than The Silver Cord. Kind of the inverse. Not very well developed, not very well produced. But like, I think I would rather listen to Willoughby's Beach. So I'm kind of considering switching these two. Because are all of these albums D's, or they just happen to be lower than the C tiers? Does that make sense? Like, this isn't a D tier. What was I thinking? Come on. Okay. Yeah, that's better. I know it's in the same place technically, but it should be there instead of there. I think. I actually think I have very similar feelings about both of these albums. Like, I will listen to them and enjoy them, but I never feel like listening to them. I never wake up in the morning. It's like, wow, I can't wait to listen to Float Along, Fill Your Lungs, or wow, I just can't wait to log on to Spotify and listen to The Silver Cord. I never have ever thought that. But if someone puts them on, I'm vibing with it. However, I have woken up and said I want to listen to Willoughby's Beach and dance around my room. Controversial opinion, but I think that needs to be moved up. I love that all of that just got rearranged for like the most mid album. When Flight B741 first was released, I had a bit of apprehension, let's say, because the last couple albums just hadn't been to my taste. Like, Changes was definitely up there, but the rest of like the post 2021 albums were kind of like, like the Giztober albums. I was just like, they're okay. So I was worried that I was like losing steam with the band or something. But when I clicked play on this, oh my god, it blew my mind. I love this album. I love that it's like a classic blues rock sound. I was so excited. I showed it to my dad right away, and even he liked it, and he hates all this stuff. And I remember the day it came out, I took my bike out and just rode around town, and I listened to it 3 times in a row, and I just couldn't stop. Gosh, like, my favorite song on this album, Changes, every day, it feels like, because I think each one has something unique to offer. At the beginning, when I first heard it for the first couple months, I was really into raw feel, but lately Field of Vision has just been like surprising me with how good that is when you listen to it on its own. Just really good album. Again, I don't want to take this too much into account, but I also love like the music video for La Risk, and I love that song. And I love how much fun it seemed that the band had making this. I love that every single member gets to sing on this album. There's personality in this. I love how in Daily Blues they all sign off at the end, like, "We've been your pilots, thanks for flying." It's so cute. I love it. I would say Daily Blues is probably my least favorite song in the album. Lyrics are a little cheesy, intentionally so. It's kind of long for what it is, but I really like this album. I think it definitely goes in the A tier, and maybe the top of the A tier. So now what I'm going to do is kind of look at what we have going on here and see if there's anything that I want to change. I feel really good about the S tier. I think that these four are my favorite albums and some of the most critically creative, interesting, well-produced albums as well. I think I'm going to put Paper Mâché Dream Balloon above LW. I think that this is maybe a bit of an underrated album, and it was my #1 favorite for a little while. I have a big soft spot in my heart for it. B tier, kind of an eclectic mix here. Feel good about this one being at the top. It's definitely deserves that place. And then Oddments is a perfect D tier because it's just so... There are some great, great songs. I mean, the most streamed song of the entire discography is on this album, and the most hated song among fans is on this album. Perfect D tier, right? So this is my current King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard album ranking. Definitely subject to change. My opinions on these change all the time because I listen to them so often. And sometimes I notice new things or I learn new things about them that I didn't know before. And it makes me appreciate them in a new way. I'd really be curious to hear what everybody thinks in the comments, how wrong I am, and what your opinions are, or whether you agree with me, like, "Oh my god, I'm so glad you put KG so high, I love that one too." So yeah, I don't know what else to say. I just want to show off my artwork. It was really fun to do all of these album covers. I've never made a video this long, so thank you so much if you stuck all the way through, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Jump through this fucking world in it's kind of like this Aussie bush style.